So first, what I like to do, and this is a little process I've always followed, but before I lay in the flat colors for my characters, I usually like to create a layer in Photoshop, kind of like a base solid layer. That way, when I'm laying in all the flat colors, like for example, Hulk's skin, or his teeth and hair, and keep in mind each of those goes on their own layer to keep things organized. So when I'm making selections to fill in the solid colors, I can actually make a selection all the way around the outside of the form, and then by pressing Control-Alt-Shift on my keyboard, I can actually snap each selection to that solid base layer that I created initially. So it's just a really convenient and time-saving strategy to use when laying in flat colors. Alright, now I'm laying in the background here, and what I'll do with a darker background such as this one is I'll create a new layer behind my characters, and I'll apply a little bit of a glowing effect using a light feathered brush tool, just to give a little bit of contrast, so that way you can actually see the characters more easily against the darker background. And now for the explosion here that I've added behind the Hulk, basically how I did that is I just layered different filled selections. For example, the bottom layer is the dark red, and then on top of that I made two more selections on their own layers, one with more of a dark orange, and then the one on top of both is more yellow. And I just played around with the settings for these layers, like one's on overlay, one's on hard light, just so that they blend nicely. And then, of course, I just added some scattered debris coming out of the explosion just for a little bit of extra detail. And now here for the bullet effects for Captain America's shield, I basically went through the same process that I did when I applied the explosion, just basically layering different layers and applying different settings to each layer so that they blend well. Okay, now what I've done here is I've saved the Photoshop file and I've opened it up in Autodesk Sketchbook, which I think is a really cool feature that Sketchbook has implemented, the fact that you can open a layered Photoshop file in another program and still retain all the original layers and effects that you had applied previously. So what I do here is I actually apply all the shading in Autodesk Sketchbook using a slightly textured brush tool. And this is just a new technique that I've been experimenting with over the past few weeks, and I think it's really sticking, because I actually really like the painted effects blended with my sort of cartoony, dynamic style. I think it's just something that's a little bit new and refreshing, since I've always previously colored using the same techniques, which were inspired by my favorite artistic inspiration, and that would be Patrick Brown. He's an Australian illustrator, great guy, I've met him before, crazy talented artist. So, like I said, I took a lot of techniques that I learned from him, but now I think I'm starting to go a little bit in my own direction with this new coloring technique. Okay, so now I've saved the file in Autodesk Sketchbook, and I've reopened it again in Photoshop, where I'm going to add all of the highlights and rim lighting and just other last-minute effects to really tie this piece together. For the rim lighting now, I created a new layer on top of all the existing layers below, and I made a selection around the edge of the Hulk's body here, for example, and I just filled it in using the gradient tool with a light shade of yellow. And for some of the highlights, what I do is I go to a specific layer, such as the skin or his hair, and I'll make a simple selection, and then I'll use the color dodge tool to lighten up that area of the layer to create a little bit of a highlight. And then one of the last things I also do with the line work is I'll go to the inks and I'll change that layer to lumosity, and then I'll go to hue saturation and I'll increase the lightness of the line work a little bit, so that way the colors underneath actually show through a little. That way the line work just blends smoothly with the rest of the coloring. Okay, so after I've finished coloring both of the characters and tweaking the color levels and everything, last thing I'll do is I'll just tweak the lightness and darkness of the background elements, add a little bit more contrast behind the characters if needed. And here I actually tried to apply a little bit of a blur effect to the Hulk's fist to show that it's flying forward a little bit, but I wasn't too fond of that, so I scrapped it. Okay, so after making a few final adjustments here and there, I'm going to call this piece done. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and thanks so much for watching. See you guys next time.